Review of cohorts. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the NPR show, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me.
Oh, thank you.
But it's a show that does like quizzes and comedy about kind of current events and news episodes. One of the things that they do on there's kind of like an identify the real news story out of three options.
Oh, yeah.
So I do want you to understand what you're about to hear was one of the unreal options. So this is not an actual news story. It's one of the other options. But I thought it's just too much fun about the boomer cohort.
You'll laugh, you'll cry. Well, mostly you'll laugh.
A pop critic in Denver. And your last story of a job opening at a newspaper comes from Roxanne Roberts.
Baby boomers, it's time to go gently into that good night, and the LA Times is going to help. The paper just created a new beat informally dubbed Bye Bye Boomers, designed to cover the waning influence of the all about me generation. Quote, baby boomers don't realize they're getting old, said 28-year-old cultural editor Marissa Newhall. My mom keeps saying 50 is the new 30, and I tell her, no, Mom, 50 is still 50. The new reporter will examine how the newest senior citizens have aged out of target audiences for TV, movies, fashion, music, and social media. Proposed stories include why it's not cool to friend your children on Facebook, why Conan is funny and Leno isn't, and trust us, spandex is not your friend. The new position caused some hurt feelings among the newspaper's older editors until Newhall gave a pop quiz and not one knew if Taylor Swift was a man or a woman. Newhall promises that boomers will still get plenty of attention. Who, she said, do you think is getting all my Social Security contributions?
All right, let me review your choices for you. Put it this way.
Can we hear the rest?
Oh, it's just the...
I know.
You can go to NPR
All right.
listen to the entire show. And then what's probably even funnier is I was working at home on Monday, and my wife had our local, I think it's a local show actually, up in Ventura County, where they're interviewing some therapist or psychologist, and they were talking about aging issues. And he seriously said that 50 is the new 30. And some of the other things that are going on here, but not trying to be funny. Anyway. How many of you have noticed on the syllabus that there's lifespan developmental psych 3 happens twice? Good. Hopefully I'll actually remember to change it before next year, or actually be 2 years before I see such again. Like when I saw it this week, it struck me that, I think last time I talked, of course, I expected I wouldn't change it. Anyway, actually before we dive into personality, there are 2 or 3 things I wanted to just pick up on that I either meant to say or that were kind of continuations from last week's discussions or from some of the feedback that I got. By the way, I didn't get a lot of midterm course evals from very many people, and what I got seemed to be mostly from people who love the class. And thank you. The rest of you have anything to say that you'd like to see corrected, let me know. One thing was actually kind of prompted by a question somebody had about another topic. I don't remember if it was from the in-classroom group or the online group. Somebody asked about substance abuse and addiction, which reminded me to remind you all that in the spring we have the Counseling Older Adults and Their Families course, which is when we get into a lot of abnormal psych problems of later life and their psychological treatment. So if you're interested in mental health and aging issues on any level, 522 is the course to take. Actually, having taught both, since there's a lot of clinical psych and aging doctoral students, and not so much in the room, but out there, in cyberspace. Having taught both, g522 gives you more coverage of the knowledge base of mental health and aging than the clinical psych and aging DIPRAC over in psych does. The DIPRAC gives you a lot more skills, but the course I think does a better, more complete job of covering some of the knowledge base. Speaking of knowledge base, both in our class discussion and then in some of the Blackboard discussion interchanges we've had over the last week or so, several people have sort of indicated thinking of formal education, I think even on up to this level, is being more, mostly if not entirely, about the accumulation of knowledge and facts. And we talked about this a little bit last week, but I couldn't stop myself from coming back to it again this week. I think especially at this level, hopefully even like maybe even in good high schools and certainly college and university, some of your training should also be giving you additional skills and actually, particularly at the graduate professional level, kind of shaping attitudes as well as knowledge. Now, I do think that a lot of times the skills training is more implicit than explicit. Sometimes when you're really in practice-oriented classes, it can be more explicit. Like one example that came up in the Blackboard discussion is somebody was talking about, even at the like K through 12 level, the idea that there's been a real shift from like rote learning and memorization to other kinds of education. But I think even like with rote learning, so there's like in a way, the purpose of the rote learning may be to actually teach you how to memorize stuff, rather than to teach you the stuff that you're memorizing. And that's kind of what I mean by like the implicit aspects of and the skills that you're picking up, I think are often not so much the things that you're actually maybe immediately, explicitly focused on, which sometimes are kind of facts and knowledge accumulation, or at least look like that to some large degree. And like several years after I finished my doctoral training, I was working in a community mental health setting. It struck me that one of the things that graduate education, particularly well, I didn't get a master's degree, so it's kind of embedded in a PhD, but the graduate training had done for me is that unlike most of the people that I was working around who didn't have graduate degrees, you know, writing anything that was shorter than like 10 pages was like nothing to me. And a lot of people that I worked with, the idea of writing like a one-page memo was an overwhelming task. So yeah, in a way, like one of the things that you're learning, a lot of paper writing isn't only about the knowledge that you have to get to write the paper, but it's actually about developing the skill of writing and doing that so often it becomes second nature to you. And writing, at least if you're doing it right, also really shapes and clarifies your thinking. Particularly, you know, as you get to a level where you're really pursuing some of your own ideas, whether it's in the graduate school world or in your post-education professional life, you know, there's a real difference. Some things just sound so good and so clear in your head, and you think you really understand it, and you've got this down, and you know what you want to do, and then you try to write it down,
And then it's different.
and you look at it, and I don't have any idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Or you go back over the whole, like, the writing and reviewing what you've written and revising that kind of process really changes both the clarity of your thinking and the nature of your thinking, especially as we get into some of the kind of critical thinking things through this class that
Well, you see the gaps in
That's
your
another
knowledge, or
level.
the holes in your knowledge that
Yeah.
you didn't see before.
but also skills. And then you want to think about both things.
No, but I
Knowledge
mean,
and skills.
when you're forced to write something and put it together, then you can see the concepts that you don't understand as well. It helps you clarify your understanding.
You could disorganize your thinking, actually. Yeah.
I wouldn't go that far.
I've been talking about myself.
I'm teasing.